If you want to future-proof your career, stop thinking about your job title and start thinking about the problems you solve. Welcome to the Leadership Career Accelerator, where we help aspiring leaders like you build executive presence, influence with impact, and get recognized and promoted. I am longtime CEO Barry Moline. My mission is to help you grow as a leader, elevate your career, and improve your life. If you enjoy learning leadership tools, hit subscribe. In return, my promise is to keep bringing you ideas that make you a better leader. Let me ask you a question. What if the biggest threat to your career isn't AI, but failing to prepare for what's coming next after AI and after this economic slowdown? Economic uncertainty, rapid advances in artificial intelligence, and changing workplace expectations have left many young professionals wondering what comes next. In this episode, I sit down with coach and career strategist Emma Graham to explore the practical steps you can take to stay valuable, adaptable, and ready for new opportunities. Rather than focusing on what's outside of your control, Emma explains how to strengthen the skills, mindset, and relationships that will help you thrive no matter how the job market evolves. In this episode, you'll learn practical strategies to future-proof your career by embracing AI, strengthening your core skills, and becoming more adaptable. You'll discover why understanding your unique value and the business problems you solve is more important than your job title. And you'll understand how relationships, personal visibility, and taking ownership of your career can open doors to new opportunities, even during uncertain times. Get ready to discover how small, intentional steps today can build a stronger, more resilient career for tomorrow. Today, I'm talking with Emma Graham. Emma is a career coach who helps marketers and creatives gain clarity, confidence, and direction in their careers. She draws on more than 25 years in corporate training, recruitment, and coaching, helping people take ownership of their career paths, make purposeful decisions, and position themselves confidently in a competitive job market. Let's get into it. Well, welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Barry. Pleasure to be here with you.
So, Emma, let's see, you're in Australia, and for me, it's about 4:20 in the afternoon. And what time is it by you?
So it is 9:20 the following morning. So I'm actually coming to you from the future, Barry. Imagine that.
That's good. All right. So you're going to tell us stuff that we need to know.
I know.
At least for tomorrow and beyond. Yeah, I love it.
What does the future hold?
But we're going to find out today. This is great. So, Emma, we're talking about what's going on in the world and the economy and what the job market looks like, and then what people can do for themselves in order to get them ready for their current job, their next job, and have an impact wherever they're planted, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, in the U.S., the economy is kind of soft, I guess we'd say. It's young professionals, people graduating out of college are having a difficult time finding work. There's less difficulty finding jobs in the trades, electricians, plumbers, welders, those kind of things. But people with college degrees, there's a lot of competition for jobs. So companies are hiring more slowly or more carefully. What's it like in Australia?
Very similar. Same in the UK. As you said, I live in Australia now, but I'm originally from the UK. So I always watch what's going on over there as well. But very, very similar, but pretty flat economically. Productivity is pretty low. Challenging, really challenging times, a lot of uncertainty, particularly with AI coming in, and what does that mean for the future of jobs? And as you said, the competition is pretty tough. The number of applicants for each job is really high. It's challenging to kind of stand out and differentiate yourself. There's this term that's floating around. I don't know if you've come across it when we sort of talk about uncertainty. VUCA. Have you heard that term? VUCA.
I have heard it. Tell us what it means.
Consultancy term, I guess. Actually, originally from the US Army, but volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it seems a pretty apt kind of analogy for what's going on at the moment, because I think the thing that probably feels different to people is that it feels like it's coming from all sides. You know, we've gone through kind of cycles of change before. That's nothing particularly new. I think the thing that's different is the amount and the level of change. And as I say, it feels like it's just kind of coming from all angles. And I think that term VUCA kind of encapsulates that quite well.
Yeah. So you talk to a lot of people, you coach a lot of people, and what are they saying about concern for their jobs?
I think it comes back to that word uncertainty. And people just, I mean, obviously none of us know what the future holds. I know a little bit more about the next 12 hours than you because I'm in the future. But other than that, you know, none of us has a crystal ball. We don't know what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years. We're all guessing, essentially. Some people making more educated guesses than others, but they're all guesses. And I think it's that uncertainty that is making people feel uncomfortable. You know, as human beings, we're not great at uncertainty. Kind of, you know, evolution's helped us in many ways, but when it comes to uncertainty, less so. We hate uncertainty. We will stay in a situation that we don't like if it's certain, rather than risk the uncertain future. And given all the volatility and all the change at the moment, it is uncertain. You know, there's not much we can do about that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really helpful in that perspective is to try and separate out the things that we can actually have control over from the things that we can't. And all of that VUCA world, you know, all of that economy, all of the other stuff that's kind of going on. As individuals, there's really nothing that we can do to impact any of that. So trying to, obviously, you know, you're going to be aware of it, you're going to know it's there, but trying not to just become overwhelmed by all of the stuff that's kind of coming at us, and just kind of thinking, is that something that I can have direct impact over? Should I be putting significant amounts of my energy into worrying about that thing? Yes or no? And what are the things that kind of are within my locus of control? What are those things? And maybe I should actually redeploy that energy into focusing on those aspects rather than the things that, whilst they're very important, I'm not saying they're not, I actually can't have a direct impact on them.
So we can't control the economy.
No.
We can't control what businesses are hiring and which ones aren't. But there are certain things that we can do to prepare ourselves to be ready for a job, or be ready or engage in a variety of activities to present ourselves in the best possible light. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
By what you can control, what you can't control?
Absolutely. And the phrase that I've been using around that is essentially, quote unquote, future-proofing, which has become it's funny, I was thinking about it this morning, knowing that I was talking to you and thinking, gosh, I reckon, you know, even 6 months ago, had I even heard the term future-proofing? I don't know that I had, but it's kind of now, for the obvious reasons, become this quite ubiquitous term. And that's essentially what I'm talking about there. What are the things that I can control? What are the things that are going to directly impact my own career prospects? And what can I do to make sure that I'm focusing on those as best as I can, building myself up for a uncertain future? And future-proofing, I think, is just quite a useful way to think about that.
So what are some of those things that people can turn to future-proof themselves, and so they can be ready for a job, or make sure that they're sort of on top of the skills and characteristics that are needed in the workforce?
Yeah, I'll start with the most obvious one, and then we can come to the ones that are perhaps slightly less obvious. The obvious one, as far as I'm concerned, is learn to work with AI. I think maybe even up to a year ago, you could probably still make an argument as to which direction was it going to go in, should I, shouldn't I? The horse has bolted. I don't think there's any should or shouldn't I left to think about there. I would say you absolutely must. In whatever your kind of chosen field is, learn to work with AI, learn to integrate it into what you're doing, into your workflows. If the organisation that you're in is offering some training around that, great, maximise that opportunity. If they're not, to my kind of focus on the things that you can control point, learn it for yourself. It is going to be so critical to you. Find training. If you aren't able to pay for training or access training, just teach yourself. Get online, play with the tools, figure out what they can do, trial and error. Just absolutely critical. I still read things here and there with people trying to debate a little bit as to how much it's going to come and how impacted we're all going to be. And again, no one knows the future, but I don't think it's worth debating anymore whether it's going to be part of our day-to-day lives. As I say, that horse has bolted. So that's the obvious one. You've kind of got to start to learn to work with AI.
I agree. In some form, AI is going to be with us forever. So it is important to get to know it. There's two things that I have found that are valuable for learning about AI. One is talking to your friends or colleagues or family members, whoever is also interested in AI and learning, share with them regularly. If you can, weekly. Oh, here's something cool that I learned, or I'm using this program to do this that is saving me time. And you can learn so much from each other that it's like, a giant mushroom of activity. It just explodes opportunities to learn from each other. I have a particular friend that we get together every few weeks and just talk about the cool things we've learned in the last 3 weeks. It's kind of amazing. And it's so much nicer to have a friend showing you something or a colleague showing you something than trying to read it online, or whatever, and walk through it. I mean, it's certainly possible to do that. Another interesting tool that I found, or I should say process that I found, is to use AI in your job. You can ask AI what ways to help you in your job. And I was speaking to a group of educators, and I had job descriptions for a variety of people in the organization. They were educators or administrators, and I think I had 5 job descriptions, and I put each one into ChatGPT, and I said, here's the job description for this position. What can AI help them do? And it came up with a list of things that it could speed some things up. Yeah. And just that action alone helps you understand where AI is good. And also, I did also ask the question where AI is not good for this job, because there were elements of the job that involved customer service. And, some elements of customer service can be addressed with AI, but not face-to-face stuff. So it was very clear. This stuff will speed up your work, and this stuff requires a human. And that was really fun to do, because the folks that I were talking to were completely lost on AI. So if you want to look at your own job, you can just ask Chat or Claude, how it can help you in your current job. And you can even have it ask a series of questions. This is my job. Ask me some questions about how you can help me. So I think that there's some ways that people can sort of lower their anxiety level on AI if they use AI to help understand it. And maybe now ask AI for some training too. But I haven't asked AI for that precisely.
I like the idea of doing it along with a friend as well, because you're also kind of maximizing your opportunities for learning there, because say you and I are doing that together, you're perhaps doing something slightly different than I am. I've perhaps learned more about one aspect than you have, and vice versa. So you're actually kind of doubling your exposure with the same amount of time, which I really like. And also, it's evolving so rapidly. that just having more than one person kind of trying to keep across all of that is in and of itself really helpful. So yeah, I really like that idea. That's great.
Yeah. All right. So what's another lever that people can pull in order to help deal with what's going on in their anxiety in today's workforce?
I think that the next one is kind of for me, the sort of the foundational one, as it were. It's getting really clear on what your core skill set is and what your core skills are, and trying to separate those skills from the job title and not just think of yourself as I'm a marketer or I'm an accountant or I'm a manager, whatever it might be. What are actually the key skills that you're bringing to the table outside of your job title, and getting really clear and really specific on what those things are. The lens that I would then put over that is, what problems do those skills enable me to solve? And I think certainly in the current job market and kind of going forward, that to me is the key question. Again, it's not, I've got 10 years experience, I've got 15 years experience, I'm a marketer. It's what business problems do I solve? If this company hires me, what problems are they solving me to hire? And having that lens and that framing changes actually the way you present your experience. It changes the way you write about your experience. It changes the way you talk about your experience, changes the questions that you ask, quite critically. So getting really clear on those things as kind of a baseline, that would be the sort of the foundational point.
So, for example, would you be saying, like, if you know you're a really good writer or editor, or you got an eye for design, or if you're really good with databases or something like that, just knowing that about yourself is really important?
Yeah, knowing those individual things. Yeah, I'm really great with people. And then even drilling down a bit further, like, what is it that I do that makes me great with people? What are those people skills? Maybe I'm a great listener. Maybe I'm a really strong communicator. I can articulate a message really clearly and succinctly, like really breaking those elements down.
Okay, that's good. And because when you know yourself, that way you can present your value better.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that question around solving problems, to me, that speaks directly to value, because you hit the nail on the head there. That's the point that you actually want to get to. You want to be able to get to the point where you can really clearly articulate essentially your value proposition. Why would this organization hire me? What value do I bring? What problems do I solve? And that lens, again, I think it's just lens framing. I've used the two words interchangeably. It's switching the onus from, instead of the onus being about me and what I do, it switches the onus to the employer. What can I do for the employer? What skills am I bringing? What value am I bringing? And I think too often we lose sight of that. We just see it from our perspective, and we don't necessarily translate that experience or that skills into what the employer is looking for.
Yeah, that's a great point, is that we need to have certain skills, obviously, but we need to know how we are helping our employer accomplish certain goals. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, it sounds a very, very simple thing to say, but I think so often that gets lost, and particularly in hiring processes. I think it's just, it's human nature. We see things from our own perspectives, because it's our experience, because there are skills, we sometimes overlook the secret sauce, the superpowers, if you like, often because they come so naturally to us that we just assume that everyone's doing that thing. It's interesting. It's actually one of the questions that I ask clients when we're talking about value proposition and kind of how they talk about their careers. I often ask, what are the skills that come so naturally to you that you almost overlook them, that you don't even sort of think to mention them? Because I've had so many conversations with people where I've sort of been asking them about their skills and they're talking about what they do, and then right at the end, almost as a throwaway comment, they'll kind of throw something out going, oh yeah, and I kind of do this, and people have told me I'm quite good at that. And almost invariably, that thing that they were just throwing out as if it was nothing almost invariably is actually their superpower, if you like, but they're too close to it. They don't see it. It comes so naturally that they've sort of lost that objectivity. But thinking about skills in that way, and as I said, presenting it more so from the value to the employer as opposed to yourself is really key.
Yeah, I can see that. That's really good. So know thyself and know how you and understand how your value helps your employer. All right. Yeah. What other levers are up your sleeve?
There's one kind of related to that one. It's kind of part of it, I guess, a little bit. And you mentioned it there in terms of know thyself. And I think the skills is the first part. And then the second part is essentially kind of increasing self-awareness. And some of that, I think, is a framing. So, for example, when you hear people talk about the skills that are most in demand, both now and in the future, probably the one skill that comes up the most is adaptability. Everyone is talking about adaptability for the obvious reasons. We're all having to adapt and change in a pretty constant manner at the moment. And one of the things that I think is useful there from a self-awareness perspective is, yes, absolutely. Adaptability is probably the one key skill that everyone's talking about at the moment. And yes, absolutely. Adaptability is a skill and you can increase that skill. The reason I mention it in relation to self-awareness though is because I think, again, sometimes we're missing actually the framing or missing the amount of adaptability that we already have. So for example, someone of my generation, I'm 49. So in the context of adaptability, when I entered the workforce, I remember the first computer coming. Didn't have a mobile phone. I remember the first computer. I remember using fax machines. I remember dial-up internet. I remember having to use email for the first time. Fast forward through that, through mobile phones, through digital, through mobile, through social, to where we are now. And if you're looking for a story of adaptability, literally your career, your career history and even your life experience to that point has been a story about adaptability. And that can very, very easily be overlooked. Equally, perhaps someone who's a bit younger, who's maybe just graduating from college or coming into the workforce for the first time, you may not have examples of adaptability perhaps in your work life yet. But I'm sure you'll have them. You might do. Perhaps you've been working through college or had other jobs. Again, there'll definitely be stories in there. But there's probably stories in your life outside of school. Maybe you've been part of sport. Maybe you've been on sports teams for years. Again, there'll be multitudes of stories of adaptability in there. So just thinking about it slightly differently sometimes and not just kind of always defaulting to, oh, I need to be more adaptable. So, I need to have a growth mindset and, I need to be constantly learning and all of these things. They're positive things. Of course they are. But don't overlook what you've already got and what's already in there. And actually, I think of it very much around kind of career narrative and telling the story of your career. And adaptability is absolutely something that you can just kind of weave into that story. So understanding what skills you have and also having some self-awareness around the things that you might actually be overlooking within your experience.
So you're talking about adaptability, and I interpret that, as the word change, and be adaptable to changes as they take place. And what if I'm not really good with change? What if I kind of like things the way they are? We know the world is changing. Just are there any tactics that I can use that would help me be more adaptable?
Yeah. I think to the first point of you saying, someone saying, I don't like change and it's not kind of a comfortable place for me to be. I think the bad news is that it's something that you're just going to have to work on, because the reality of the kind of the VUCA world that we're in, again, I think it's one where the kind of the horse has bolted, and I think it's, unfortunately, it's something that you're going to need to build. But like we said, you can build that. And I think some of the ways to do that is just small steps in the short term. It doesn't have to be some huge wholesale change that just feels really overwhelming. what's one small thing that I can do today that just pushes me a little bit outside of my comfort zone, that's something new, that's something I haven't done before. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a work-related activity. It might be something that you do in your personal life. The bizarre example that springs to my mind is like, cold plunge, which is the thing that everyone's obsessed with. Just something that, is new to you, that you haven't done, that feels uncomfortable, that you can go, okay, that feels accessible. I can do that. And then just start to kind of build in some of those habits. And as you start to feel more comfortable, then you might start to take some of that into your work life as well. And I totally agree with your definition there around change. And I think openness to change is kind of how I think of it. Openness to change, but not by definition meaning that you have to change, but that your mindset is, I am open to change, and if change is the best path forward, then I will take it, but not necessarily default to always having to change.
Yeah, and I really liked your idea about looking for small opportunities to make a shift in what you're doing. And I mean, we've talked about some things related to AI, just in terms of working, checking in with friends or colleagues and learning a little bit from them, or looking at some news that's going on. And news is news because it's likely there's a change of what's happening. So whatever that might be, try to look for small opportunities that you can make shifts so that address the general direction of where society is going, where your company's going, and that can be helpful. I can see that. I like the small steps.
And it might be something, I'm just thinking of some other examples, and again, they sound really simple, but start to kind of compound over time. It might be something really, really simple, like, I always walk the same way to the train station, so I'm going to walk a different way today. I always do the exact same workout when I go to the gym, so I'm going to do a slightly different workout today, or a completely different workout today. Just little small things. It's, I think, where so many people go wrong is they default to really big change, and then it feels really overwhelming, and then it just doesn't happen. So just trying to really chunk down what's something really small that doesn't feel too overwhelming, and start there.
Yeah, those are all great ideas, just to get your brain accustomed to change a variety of things. If things are changing at work, look for becoming more adaptable in other parts of your life, which will help those changes at work. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Good. All right. What else? What else can we do to be ready for this changing economy?
The next one is essentially building relationships. So again, sounds really simple, but I think it's one of those things that gets overlooked, and I think it gets overlooked. We're all busy. Organisations are trying to do more with less. We're stretched at work. We're busy. We've perhaps got families, lives outside of work. There's a lot going on. And it's one of those things that I think most people know that they should do, but it invariably just kind of drops down the to-do list and kind of never happens. But to me, it is so critical, because by building relationships, both internally with the organisation that you currently work in, externally to the organisation within your current industry, outside of your current industry, to me, what you're actually doing is building options for the future. And all of these things around future-proofing, to me, are about giving yourself more options. Instead of having this very narrow path, I want to have a broader path that can enable me to go in different directions potentially. And building really strong relationships and building a network is absolutely part of that. And I think I mentioned both internally and externally, because I think that's one of the things that gets missed as well. I think people, when you talk about networking, invariably default to external networking and don't necessarily think about the networking within the organisation that they work for. And actually, that's probably the most critical one, because they're the people that will be promoting you potentially, inviting you onto new and different projects, who have your career trajectory within that organization essentially in their hands. And if they don't know you and they don't know what you do, the value that you bring, the projects that you're working on, then they can't recommend you. But if you're actually proactively building relationships with those people, essentially telling them about the work that you're doing and the value that you're bringing, when they're having those conversations kind of around the table of, okay, we're ranking end of year performers, or we're thinking about, we've got this new position, who's going to be promoted. You want people in that room to be saying your name. And if they don't know you and they don't know what you've done, then they're not going to say your name. Simplistic example, but that's essentially what it comes down to. So being really proactive and strategic also about the relationships that you build. I heard a really nice analogy around this. Actually, it was a lady that was on my podcast. She said, think of your network as both a trampoline and a safety net. So it's there to catch you if something goes wrong. So say, for example, you get made redundant. You've got that safety net of your network that you can turn to potentially help you find your next role. And they're also a trampoline, so that when the opportunity for promotion or an opportunity in a different organisation comes along, they're the people who can catapult you forward and say, oh, actually, we've got this opportunity within our organisation. I'd like to recommend Emma because I know her and I think she's great. So I really like that idea of kind of trampoline and safety net. I think it's a really helpful way to think about it.
Yeah, that is. Relationships kind of scare me. Well,
tell me.
Let me put it another way.
Explain yourself, Barry.
Yeah. Considering that I sort of spent a career meeting new people and engaging with relationships and advocacy and things, I don't know, it always gives me a little bit of anxiety walking into a room and not knowing people, what do I need to say? That's one element, and but actually I think the one that you just talked about, which is making sure that you know the people that you work with, especially supervisors and so on, because those are the ones that can make decisions about your career within that company. And I wonder if there's any advice you have for engaging with people. Is it just something as simple as trying to have a little more personal conversation whenever you have a moment? I mean, this doesn't have to be a big thing, right?
No, I think going back to your first point there, I think the most important thing with networking is doing it in a way that feels authentic to you. So not saying to someone, networking is having to go to huge conferences and you've got to introduce yourself to 100 people. Well, if I'm a little bit more introverted, I'm never going to do that. So I can sit there and nod and go, oh, sure, yeah, I'll go to the conference, but I know it's not going to happen. So I think getting clear on how you do feel comfortable and how you are comfortable talking to people. And yes, again, pushing yourself slightly out of your comfort zone, but not all the way so far that it's just never going to happen. So if you're someone who's naturally a little bit more introverted, those big group networking things are not for you. So, for example, I personally don't love those big group things. Walking into a room of 100 strangers is not something that I particularly enjoy. Some people would see that as, a room of 100 friends I haven't made yet. Great. Go for it. Like, that's an environment where you will excel. For other people, less so. So you might focus more on one-to-ones. You might focus more on, can I organise a coffee with someone? Can I get 15 minutes of someone's time and just have a conversation with them? I think also, again, just perhaps changing the framing slightly from, networking, which can sound a little bit cold, potentially a little bit transactional, maybe, to me, all it is talking to people and being interested in people. And if you can do that, then you can be a successful networker. Just starting a conversation. Hi, tell me a bit about you. What brings you here today? Like, it doesn't have to be this big, daunting thing. So find ways to do it that feel comfortable to you, that feel authentic to you. And as you say, don't overcomplicate it. Just have a conversation with someone. How was your weekend? What's going on this weekend? Just having a little bit more conversation. And it's interesting. I don't know what the situation is in the US in regards to working from home, but in Australia, it is still very, very prominent. And there's a real reluctance for people to go back to the office. And I can understand it from a flexibility perspective. But I can't shake the feeling that people are just missing such an opportunity to connect with other people. And I think particularly if you are someone who is earlier on in your journey, the opportunity to connect with other people, to learn from people, to observe other people, to listen to other people. I just think we're missing so much valuable interaction there that it does actually really concern me. I think in 5-10 years, regardless of what happens from the AI perspective, I can't shake the feeling that there's going to be a little bit of a skills gap there because we just haven't been exposing people and people haven't been kind of exercising that muscle of just talking to people at work.
Yeah, there's so much that you just said about relationships and networking that is like a masterclass. But the thing that I think rang true the most for me and my anxiety is it's just saying, hey, hi, how are you? My name is Barry. What's your name? Oh, Emma. Yeah, it's good to meet you. And what's going on in your world, or where do you work? Or if it's at work, is like, what are you working on now? And so on. So that's really helpful. There are actually small actions that we can take. It's not that we have to know somebody's whole life history. And something you said, I wanted to understand if we had if I have the right definition. You use the word redundant, if you've been made redundant. And I think
you've been laid off. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Laid off or downsized. Is that kind of the thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good, good,
so
good.
The English and the Australians say redundant, but it's a layoff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think there's one other element in that coming into a room of strangers is that probably the majority of people in that room also feel anxious because they're also in a room of strangers. So everybody's feeling that kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it's a simpler set of actions that you can take as you described.
I think so. Yeah, again, I think it's one of those things that we're probably all slightly guilty of overcomplicating sometimes. And I think you hit the nail on the head there of other people in the room are probably feeling it too. So even just calling that out, even just calling out the elephant in the room and saying to the person perhaps sat next to you going, I don't know about you, but I find these things really awkward. I never know what to say to anyone. And you've immediately broken the ice and you're immediately in a conversation. And it's just been quite a natural thing as opposed to trying to have this perfect elevator pitch for, that's going to feel awkward. It's going to put you under a lot of pressure, but just being a normal human being and just talking to people, I think is the easiest way to think of it.
Yeah, that's great. And then any more levers here that we can pull?
I've got two more. One is very much related to what we were talking to about network and getting to know more people. And it's essentially personal branding. I don't love the term personal branding, but it's the easiest term to use because people understand kind of what it means. I prefer to think of it as being visible to a broader group of people and being known for what it is that you do. There's some, again, that sort of value proposition is tied to it of, I know Emma, she's a career coach. I know she does X, Y, Z, and having a broader group of people kind of know that. And it is partly tied to networking and having more conversations, being more curious and asking questions of other people. But it does come back to that value proposition piece. So like with my earlier example of the people sat around the table talking about, end of year performance or who we're going to promote. Yes, they need to know who Barry is. They need to know, I know Barry, but they also need the bit after that. They need the kind of the value proposition bit. I know Barry and Barry does X, Y, and Z. And having that clarity or having people know you as the value that you bring is the bit that you want to get to. And having essentially a definition of that in your own head when those conversations are going on, when people are, what do I want people to be saying about me? And then finding ways to actually bring that into a conversation. So, for example, I'm sat there having my end of year performance review with my manager. We might get to the end of that and I might summarize and say, well, okay, so what I've heard from this conversation or what I take from this conversation is I've had a really good year for these reasons. And what you're essentially doing is giving that person the sentence that you want them to say when they're in that conversation. So they're not kind of sitting there going, yeah, Barry's had a great year. Like, I want to put Barry forward, but what is it that actually Barry did that really made him stand out? You've given them the sentence that you want them to say. And I think it's that kind of additional layer that thinking about kind of personal brand or visibility brings. Again, that's quite a simplistic example, but I just think it's just kind of makes the point and helps people to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can see that. I was also thinking about it, relating it to what you spoke on earlier and clarifying your core skills. And is this to some degree now sharing,
absolutely,
allowing others to know your core skills? Yeah. Well, and for example, if you are really good, if you're a really good people person, people should know that you're a good people person. And when they say, oh yeah, Emma, she's a really good people person. When we're at an event, she engages with so many people, makes them feel welcome, something of that nature. And that's kind of a brand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the absolute kind of gold star version of it is going back to that earlier point about what business problems do you solve? If you can make that sentence the answer to what business problems do I solve, then you have absolutely nailed it. So it might be Barry's known for being a really experienced leader, but what is it within his leadership? Like, what are the problems that Barry is particularly good at solving? It might be that he's really good at shifting culture, bringing people along with him and shifting culture. It might be that he's really good at solving those really complex strategic problems that other people just kind of, leave in the too hard basket. Whatever the answer to that, what business problems do I solve? That's the sentence that you kind of want people to know about you.
Yeah, that's good. That's really smart. As you were saying that, I was talking to a colleague not long ago, and he is dyslexic, so he has difficulty reading.
Too.
He can read. Well, he also described how in a crisis, things slow down for him. For other people, they speed up and they see so many things coming at them all at once. And for some reason, he ties it to his dyslexia. I'm not sure why, but he can see things much more clearly in a crisis. So he's a great crisis manager. Anyway, and that's a good skill to have in the electric utility industry when you have outages and people have to get their power on. And he can say, oh, okay.
Calm and measured and
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. That's part of his brand, that he could be construed negatively, but it's not that he turns it around to a positive. It's just that he knows where the value is for his employer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can take that point into almost anything. And to me, that is the real advantage of taking control of your own career narrative, is that you get to position those things for yourself and you get to position them in the best possible light for yourself. You're not letting someone else do that for you, with the risk that they may not fully understand the value fully. They may not see the full value. They may actually perceive it negatively. If you're the one putting forward that narrative, then you're in control of it and you're positioning it to your best advantage.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. I see examples of, I've got an attorney colleague who's really good at knowing the regulations for a few things, just has them in their head, and he's the go-to person for answering those kind of questions. That's his brand. He's, you could ask Chat or Claude, but you're not going to be in the ballpark because he knows the application directly as you need it. So whatever that might be is, I can see how important that is. And then sharing your brand, because then you become indispensable on those issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. All right. You said there was one more.
One more, which kind of essentially, I guess, kind of ties everything together a little bit. And that is, I would encourage everyone to be proactive in how they approach their career. The terminology that I found myself using recently, I don't know why, because I'm not a sailor or an airline pilot, but it's to be the captain of your own ship. You are the captain of your own ship. Your career is your responsibility. It is no one else's. You need to take control of it for yourself. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to be the one who's kind of charting the course. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have all the answers, because, let's be honest, none of us do. But you're the one who's kind of steering the course, who's taking action, who is being proactive, who's making things happen for yourself, not always just waiting for things to either be done for you or to happen for you. Simple example is, I think you see this often in organisations with training and development. There's a training and development budget. I had this actually in my first job ever in Australia. We had $5,000 a year per person in our training and development budget. And it was up to us how we spent it and what we did with it. And the vast majority of people did not use it. And every year it would get to the end of the year and the general manager would stand there and say, only 2 people or whatever it was, 2 or 3 people have used their training and development budget this year. Like, it's up to you. and people don't, because sometimes they're waiting for the organisation to do it for them. So, I think even in the past, it wasn't the best approach. And certainly, with the level of uncertainty in the VUCA world that we're in, you're just making your life so much harder for yourself. So be the captain of your own ship.
I think that's so important. And there's an expression that goes something like, most people plan a week-long vacation in much more detail than they plan their career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's kind of, taking a moment to see where you are in your organization and where opportunities might be, looking outside at other organizations and where some of those opportunities might be. As you said, looking for training to expand your skills. Yeah. So thinking about where you want to be in the next, who knows, 1 year to 20 years, and not letting just circumstance dictate for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think sometimes, it just kind of happens by accident. Like, to my earlier point, we're all busy. We've got competing priorities. There's a lot going on. Time goes by quickly. And sometimes we don't realize, sometimes, oh God, 12 months have gone by and I haven't even kind of stopped to think. I think something as simple as putting an hour in your calendar at the end of, let's say, every quarter, and you block that time out and it says whatever, career thought or me time or whatever it is, and you protect that time and you don't let it be taken over, because we all do it. We will all make sacrifices and prioritize the organization, but not necessarily prioritize ourselves. And I think, and our own careers. And maybe back in the day when people had, real longevity in careers and organizations, you could make an argument. Yeah, okay. But I think that the way things are today, the volatility, the uncertainty, you need to prioritize. And it doesn't mean that you're not committed to your job, obviously, and work hard and all of that stuff, but you need to prioritize yourself and your own career. So actually just blocking some time out, as I said, once a quarter, just to actually kind of stop and reflect and to think about, what have I actually achieved this quarter? What are the goals that I've kicked? What are the accomplishments? writing those things down, gathering that evidence, because invariably, in 2 years' time, if you decide you do want to leave, you're going to have forgotten all about the things that you accomplished during that time. So one of the things I accomplished, writing those things down, having even a folder in your emails, which is kind of accomplishment folders where you might just put kind of results and deliverables in there so that you can refer back to them. What's gone well? What's not gone so well? What habits have I developed that have served me well? What do I want to take with me into the next quarter? What do I want to leave behind? Is there something that's perhaps fallen off the radar that I want to bring back on? And just taking that time for yourself to make sure that you're on track. Something I've heard quite often from people kind of on this point is, they'll come to me and they'll say, a few years have gone by and I'm just I don't even know how I ended up in this role. This isn't what I want to be doing. I've been delivering well in the organisation and they've offered me different opportunities. And of course I said yes, because they offered them to me. And then they've kind of looked around and gone, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. And you can understand how it happens, but it's that point that they actually haven't kind of stopped and gone, okay, where am I? What do I want? What am I doing? And they haven't actually been in control ultimately.
Yeah, and I love that idea to take some time once a quarter to look at your accomplishments and then also at your direction. Where would you like to go? And there's a lot of value in doing that. As a CEO, I've always asked my direct reports, what do they want to do in life? And in part, the reason I asked is because I wanted to make sure that what they were doing is still what they're doing here, or maybe it could be done better somewhere else. And I also wanted to sort of dig deeper personally to help someone on that personal level. If they said, I want to leave the organization, I would say, well, let me help you figure out what you want to do next. Nobody ever said that, but I did have my director of communications said, I'm really into sports and I love sports, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to do that here, but I don't know. I always look for things that could pop up related to sports, like being the head of communications for the NBA team or whatever, just some professional team. It's just something he would just like to do. And I said, well, you got to keep looking for those things. And then we decided to create something called a line worker competition. People that climb poles and fix wires and so on.
Yeah.
And we worked with a group of utilities, and these utilities, together with us, created this competition. And it was like a sporting event. So I said to Matt, well, can we create this, your coverage like it's a sporting event? And he thought about it and he said, there's a ton of stuff we can do. We can do stories on the day of, but we could also do backstories and, like what's going on with each team and how they got to where they are. And then we had never done this, but he asked if we could shoot video and sort of make video stories too. We were able to do it all. And we held that lineman competition annually, and he was the sportscaster. He put together, the communications for the event as if it was a sporting event. And, his job satisfaction rose significantly, all because we had that sort of vulnerable conversation, and where he said he liked sports. And when the opportunity arose, we created something that looked like sports. And it kind of was like a sport. So there was value in having that conversation. Yeah. So that's interesting. I like that. The importance of taking responsibility for your own career. And we'd like to think that others are looking out for us, but they're also looking out for themselves. Yeah. So it's important for us to do that as well.
Yeah, sometimes it might be self-interest, but often it's just busyness. They might be the most kind of genuine person in the world, but the demands on their own time just might not mean that your career is perhaps not top of mind for them.
Yeah.
their,
Good point.
their own career is top of mind for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So let's finish off. I know you have a story about how to think about your career as a career ladder or something else. So tell us about that.
It goes back to my point at the beginning about options. To me, future proofing is about trying to give yourself as many options as possible. With this uncertain future, to me, seem a little bit foolhardy to box yourself in too much. You want to keep it a little bit broad. And to that end, again, it was actually an analogy that one of my podcast guests shared with me, and she'd got it from the Harvard Business School. The traditional kind of idea of a career was a career ladder. Very simple. You can go up the rungs. I guess you can go down the rungs too, but there's just one direction of travel and that's it. And the idea that I think is so much more relevant to kind of the modern landscape of work, and also so much more helpful to the individual in terms of how to think about it, is don't think of a ladder, think of a climbing wall. And if you're standing there kind of looking up at the climbing wall, there's not just one direction of travel. You can go to the left, you can go to the right, you can go diagonally. There you might get halfway up, and then you might kind of shoot out to the side and then go up. You might even take a couple of steps backwards to open up a new direction of travel that might get you to where you want to be quicker. There's just so many more options as opposed to this one very, very narrow path. And I just think it's, just a so much more helpful way to think about it. So if you're feeling stuck, maybe try and just broaden your outlook a little bit and look to the left and the right and diagonally and backwards and all of those things. And you might see that there's some more options than perhaps you think there are.
That is a great analogy, and we can include a link to the video that you described.
Send that to you. Yeah.
But you've summarized it extremely well. It makes so much sense, and I love the idea of continuing to build skills, look at your interests, and some of those things can take you horizontally and up new paths, and that's so much fun to think about your life and career that way. So thank you for sharing that.
I think so too. You're welcome.
Well, Emma, this has been a great conversation, and we've covered so much info and
We've
talked a lot.
Some ground.
Yeah, but that's because there was a lot to talk about. And I'm really thrilled. I mean, we've taken a little more time than was our original goal, but that's because the content is fantastic. So thank you for sharing.
You're very, very welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
Bye.
So what's the one big takeaway from this episode? The one idea you can implement today? I think it's this. Future-proofing your career starts by focusing on what you can control. Emma Graham's point is that we're living in a world filled with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and none of us can control the economy, AI, layoffs, or the job market. But we can control how we prepare. We can learn to work with AI. We can get clear on the skills we bring and the business problems we solve. We can build relationships before we need them. We can become more visible for the value we create. And we can stop waiting for someone else to manage our career for us. The practical move is simple. Take 1 hour this quarter. Look at what you've accomplished. Write down the skills you're building. Identify one relationship to strengthen. And choose one small step that makes you more adaptable. You don't have to predict the future. You just have to give yourself more options when the future changes, which it most certainly will. Now it's time for action. If you're tired of managing drama, chasing accountability, and carrying the weight of a low-energy team, it's time for a better way. I help leaders and organizations build stronger teams, healthier cultures, and real momentum. Together, we'll identify where your current structure is falling short and what it will take to move from a stagnant, conflict-filled environment to a high-performing, purpose-driven organization. I speak and train frequently on leadership, teamwork and culture, influence and persuasion, and AI and the future of work. Now is the time for action. Send me an email, at barrymoline@gmail.com, and let's explore how to move you forward. I'm Barry Moline. See you soon.